All right, good morning. We're here from the Executive Leadership Training Seminars in Seaside, Oregon. I'm pleased to have with me Kent Williams. Kent is our plenary speaker this morning. He's taking a quick break, and we're just going to spend a few minutes, and he has agreed to just answer a few questions. So whether you're attending the seminar right now and you're watching this later, or you were unable to come this year, we want to deepen the learning a little bit and just go over a few things that we think will be valuable in terms of what Kent had to offer this morning. Kent, these are going to be rapid fire questions.
Absolutely.
Just to give you
Outstanding.
The first question is this. You had 33 years in law enforcement. Finished your last 8 years as a police chief in Bartlett, Illinois.
That's true.
But you have a passion for creating organizational wellness. It goes beyond wellness to just the wellness of individual officers. I mean, where did that passion come from, and what made you create Breach Point Consulting? You're the founder of that
it's a
entity.
great question. Great question. It really wasn't a well-planned out thing. I've always called it a miracle. It came from personal tragedy and me wallowing in my pain and my suffering and being exposed to the futility of the brokenness of humanity on a daily basis, and me trying to find a struggle between finding the purpose in my pain, the meaning in my suffering, and the hope found in the futility of being a contemporary guardian. And that was a real lifelong journey for me. And I wish I could sit here and say I was smart enough to figure it all out on my own. It took the work of a lot of mentoring and blessings that were willing to come into my life and help hone some of these skills. But I lost my best friend to suicide, who was the best cop I've ever met. He was Officer of the Year twice on his department in the first 5 years, and that drove me to my knees, and I was screaming out with no answers. And then we started losing some of our best cops to what I call career suicide or relationship suicide. They were blowing up all their meaningful relationships, and it really put me on a quest of why, because I realized there, but by the grace of God go I. And if we're losing our best and brightest, I mean, who isn't at risk at that point? So that's where it started, and it started intensely with my friends and my peers in the area. That grew outside the borders of my jurisdiction into the neighboring jurisdictions, and I'm here to tell you 28 years later, it has now gone coast to coast, all 50 states up through Canada and a little bit over in Europe now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's pull a piece out of the presentation, a principle that you talk about.
Sure.
I think it's called the 5-4-3-2-1.
That's exactly right.
Principle. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. I call it the breach point. Now, we know what that is tactically. A breach point tactically is a professional pause to put a plan in place to dominate a threshold, so then whereas we as individuals or a team cross over this threshold, we maximize everybody's wellness on the other side and change the environment for the better. That would be the definition of a breach point. Many years ago, after having taught that tactically, I said, why couldn't we teach that personally? In other words, to slow it down a little bit, have personal pauses in our lives where we could put a plan in and so that we can flourish and thrive in all our meaningful relationships, both personally and professionally. That kind of evolved into my studies of what's going on and why is that so difficult for our staff. I mean, these guys are blessings in a crisis, and yet they're predictably living their lives almost like a curse at home and with each other in their relationships with command staff. And I realized something. We have 5 key perspectives, which are pessimistic, non-trusting control freaks who fight change and assess blame. Now, it's funny to hear. It's like, oh my gosh, but it's true. We have to have those key perspectives in a crisis on the street. And if you're really good at that, they'll call you Officer of the Year or give you the Valor Award. But if you don't know those are your 5 perspectives, they can become what I call strings. And if you're wearing these perspectives, in other words, if they're not tools you're using, they're perspectives that you adopt and become, I call those predictably pissed off police puppets who are dangling from 5 strings that they don't even know they have. And now they're angry and tired and resentful and cynical, and it's not doing well at home or at work in their personal and professional relationships. The 5 strings get attached within 4 years, at which point we become highly self-sufficient. Police officers are some of the most self-sufficient men and women on the planet Earth, both emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. They have to be in the crisis on the street. But if you're self-sufficient with your family or each other, that's a life survived, not thrived. So we got 5 strings within 4 years, caused because of what I call the 3 dogs. We walk 3 dogs simultaneously. Another way of saying that is 3 arenas of social interaction. But it's hard to walk 1 dog. 2 is almost impossible. 3 is a nightmare. And that's the analogy I use when I teach cops, walking 3 big alpha dogs. The street, your department, and your personal life. And the street is the one arena of social interaction that creates what I call 2 phobias. The 2 phobias. Now, what's a phobia? It's an unmastered fear that changes your behavior rarely for the better. There are 2 universal phobias in law enforcement, the fear of trusting too much and the fear of controlling too little. And those fears serve us well on the street in the crisis. They keep us alive. But if you have those fears outside the crisis, the fear of trusting too much or controlling too little, now my relationship with you isn't what it should be. And those are the two phobias that have to be mastered in order to thrive in the one life we've been blessed to lead as the guardians that we are. So that's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the countdown to thriving as a contemporary guardian. And that's what I teach. And we find it's life-altering not only for the officer at work, but it's also equally, if not more important, life-altering for them at home. Because that's their safe place spiritually to go home and commune with people and to be vulnerable with others and to truly say, I love you and I get it now. I'm not a cop. You didn't call. You could call 911 like everybody else if you needed a cop. You need me. And honey, I'm home. And that's really the message we put out there, is how to get cops home vulnerable like they were before we hired them.
And a really timely message, right? We're seeing people kind of self-destruct at different points in their careers, and it's kind of widespread in law enforcement. Now, you're talking to a pretty good-sized group of police chiefs, sheriffs, state police leadership, command staff.
Absolutely.
And so 2 quick final questions. The first is, if you're the police chief or sheriff or other leader sitting there today for your department, what's next? What's the next step that you'd love to see a leader take?
Well, my gosh, that's $1 million question, and there's a lot of answers to that. And that's the 3-day seminar I put on. How could we roll out a policy differently? Because when you've trained people to be pessimistic, non-trusting control freaks who fight change and says blame, and they're scared of 2 things, trusting too much and controlling too little. And do you really want to just inflict a new policy on them? Because suddenly they see that and they're threatened by it. It scares them because they didn't write it, they didn't control it, and thus they don't trust it. So if we just inflict policies on people, cops just push back, and they're likely to call these policies bullshit. And they just resist them just because it's there. It's insulting to them because it's actually a fear-based response that serves them well on the street. So just think about how you want to roll out a policy when these are the skill sets that you're training your people to have. Maybe you don't want to just inflict it. Maybe you want to post it and ask for some input and some insight and let it kind of evolve and percolate. Now you're playing into their needs and their fears of, okay, you need to feel like a little bit more control. You have a little more control in your environment, and that you are actually part of a trusted community. Next thing you know, you'll start seeing officers thrive.
Well, I'm guessing that agencies just wait for their police chief, sheriff, or leader to come back from a conference and go, oh no, here they go.
Hey, here we go.
They learned something while they were there.
Here we go.
And so I think that's wise, right? There's a way to kind of move to change that is not all about just taking a immediate aggressive step.
Absolutely.
But it takes transition. But maybe the most important question is personally. If you're the chief, sheriff, superintendent sitting there, a lot of them are well into their careers.
Absolutely.
Some of them have dealt with kind of what you've talked about, and they've experienced some loss as a result.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to just leave with them as kind of a final thought about, so what's next for them individually?
Yeah, what I always say is vulnerability is always the key, especially to guardians of society. And so I tell them, please don't apologize for being the blessing that you are. But can you imagine going home starting tonight and stopping yourself at the threshold and literally snapping out of these perspectives and saying, I can challenge myself to cross this threshold, not as a pessimistic, non-trusting control freak who's fighting change and says blame, but actually dabble with this and see if I can come home tonight as an optimistic, trusting, empowering individual who embraces change and accepts responsibility. In other words, honey, I'm home. What we have found coast to coast and now through Europe is those are the most powerful words that our family can hear is, I'm home. I get it now.
That's fantastic. Kent Williams, thank you.
I want to thank you for all your
so
leadership.
much for being here.
Yeah, your
really
organization.
Appreciate it. Breach Point Consulting, and we'll be able to send out more information so you can get connected with Kent and his work. He has a lot to offer, and it may be your agency will be able to chance to connect with him and take advantage of some of the things that he's put together that I think really are at the heart of some of the challenges that law enforcement faces right now. So thanks so much.
Thank you
Kent.
for your
Appreciate
leadership
it.
in your organization, second to none. Thank you so much. God bless you.